this morning that on Fiesta Sundays that we have a lot of people always, it always thins out the crowd, so to speak. So I was thinking about that a little bit, and I wonder, what do you think of the idea? What if we put a big sign outside that says, "We have hot air too"? Amen. Okay, well, there we go again. No, I don't worry about that. God does have a way of blessing us, regardless of how many show up. I'm going to be like that preacher that unloads the whole bale of hay. It doesn't matter who shows up on a Sunday. So I'll tell you that story another time. Churches in the northeastern Indian state of Mizoram have a beautiful phrase to express the way they give to God. Bufai Thom. It means one handful of rice at a time. Here's how it works. Families in the church set aside a portion of rice at every meal for God. When they collect enough rice, they donate it to their local church. The church turns around and sells the rice to generate income. In 1914, they used the sale of rice to raise $1.50 in U.S. money. But lately, these Christians have been collecting $1.5 million as they support 1,800 missionaries, in addition to local ministry. People have also started giving in more creative ways, as vegetables, firewood, and other resources flow into the church's outreach for the kingdom. One church leader said, "There are many ways of serving the Lord. Some people do great things. Some people are great preachers. Some people contribute lots and lots of money. But when we talk about this handful of rice, it is very humble. The service is done in the corner of the kitchen where nobody sees it, but God knows, and He blesses it." Another church member said, "It is not our richness or our poverty that make us serve the Lord, but our willingness." So, we Mizo people say, as long as we have something to eat every day, we have something to give to God every day. Paul writes to the Philippians, and he has some very interesting things to say. Now, there's some phrases in this passage that are very familiar to us, and we quote them often, but we often forget the context in which they are embedded. Paul says, "I am delighted that you are sharing with me in my distress." Paul is distressed. Paul is in a situation that all of us would recognize as being needful. And yet he says that he is content, that he has learned that God supplies his need. But he rejoices that the Philippians are sharing in his need. They are giving to his need, not because he has need of the gift, but because it is useful for them. It is good for them to be givers. It begs for me the question, what is true generosity? What is true generosity? What does it mean to really be generous? Are we generous? Am I generous? What does it mean for us to be truly generous? Paul says there's a point to being generosity. The point is meeting people in their need. He talks about his need. And he basically is saying that wherever we see need, we should be about trying to meet it. Pastor H.B. Charles tells a story about a woman he knew who showed up at church and prayed the very simple prayer, "Oh Lord, thank you, Jesus." She prayed week after week. The kids at church would start laughing every time she opened her mouth because they knew it would be the same prayer. "Oh Lord, thank you, Jesus." Finally, somebody asked her, "Why do you pray the same little prayer?" She said, "Well, I'm just combining the two prayers that I know. We live in a bad neighborhood, and some nights there are bullets flying, and I have to grab my daughter and hide on the floor. And in that desperate state, all I know how to cry out is, 'Oh Lord.' But when I wake up in the morning and see that we're okay, I say, 'Thank you, Jesus.' When I got to take my baby to the bus stop and she gets up on that bus and I don't know what's going to happen to her whenever she's away, I cry, 'Oh Lord.' And then when 3 p.m. comes and that bus arrives and my baby is safe, I say, 'Thank you, Jesus.'" She said, "Those are the only two prayers I know. And when I get to church, God has been so good, I just put those two prayers together. Oh Lord, thank you, Jesus." There's a person who understands her need. And she understands who can supply her needs. She cries out to God to supply her needs. She cries out, I'm sure, also to God's people. After all, we're called to be the instruments through which God's love flows. We shouldn't be laughing at people who pray a simple prayer. We should be trying to identify what their need is and how we might be called by God to assist. The point is a point of need. We need to look for points of need in people's lives so that we can be God's instrument in supplying that need. And then also, Paul says we need to persist. He talks about continuing in faith. That regardless of his circumstance, he continues to believe that God will provide for him. That sometimes there's plenty, sometimes there's little, but he persists in knowing that God will supply his need. In 1983, Australia hosted its ultra marathon, a 573.7 mile foot race from Sydney to Melbourne. It's a race that takes days to run, and professionals from all over the world come to participate. Shortly before the race began, a 61-year-old farmer named Cliff Young, wearing overalls and galoshes over his boots, walked up to the registration table and requested a number to enter the race. The people at the registration table thought it was a joke, that someone was setting them up, and so they laughed. But Cliff said, "No, I'd really like to run." So they gave him a number and they pinned it on his old coveralls. Cliff Young walked over to the start of the race. All of the professional runners who were decked out in all their running regalia looked at him like he was crazy. The crowd snickered. They laughed even more when the gun went off and the race began, because all those professional runners had sculpted bodies and beautiful strides, but not Cliff Young. He didn't even run like a runner. Cliff Young ran with an awkward, goofy-looking shuffle. All through the crowd, people were laughing, and finally someone called out, Get that old fool off the track. 5 days, 14 hours, and 4 minutes later, at 1:25 in the morning, Cliff Young shuffled across the finish line of the 573.7-mile ultra marathon. He had won the race. And he didn't win by a matter of minutes or even an hour or two. The second place runner was 9 hours and 56 minutes behind him. Cliff Young had set a new world record for the ultramarathon. The press mobbed him, wondering what kind of special running shoes he must have had, and they rummaged through his backpack, wondering what he'd survived on. He'd lived primarily on pumpkin seeds and water. And then they discovered the secret to his success. Cliff Young had shuffled his way to victory without ever sleeping. The other runners would run for 18 hours straight and then stop and sleep for 3 or 4 hours. He endured running 5 days, 14 hours, and 4 minutes straight without sleep at the age of 61. Now, I don't know about you, that'd be a tough thing for me to do. Paul says we need to persist. Sometimes when you try to give something to somebody, they're taken aback. They don't know how to receive it. They don't know how to trust that somebody would give them something freely. We're taught in our world to be suspicious of free things, to be suspicious of gifts. We actually practice a kind of a reciprocal gift giving. Whenever somebody gives us something, we expect that we're obligated to give them something of similar value. At least that's the way it always operated at Christmas in my family. God persists. God gives us Himself. He continues to give us Himself even when we refuse Him. Even when we don't acknowledge Him, He persists. And we too are called to persist in loving a world that sometimes doesn't respond with kindness to an act of generosity. We need to persist. We need to persist in showing the world God's love. We need to be like Cliff Young. Oh, we may look awkward doing it. It may not be a refined thing. But if we persist, I think we'll win the race. Because God's generosity never quits. God's generosity is always there for us. We need to persist, but then we need to understand the prospects of generosity. We quote this verse quite often from Philippians. My God will supply all of your needs according to His riches in Christ Jesus. God's supply of our needs according to His riches in Christ Jesus. There's a difference between according to and out of. There's a difference between saying God will supply all of your needs according to His riches, and a difference between saying He will supply your needs out of His riches. Imagine you're a billionaire and you have 3 $10 bills in your wallet. You get out of a cab and you hand the driver one of the bills for an $8 fare. Later in the day you look in and find out there's only one $10 bill there, and you say, either I dropped the $10 bill somewhere or I gave the taxi driver 2 bills. What are you going to do? Are you going to get all upset? Are you going to go to the police and demand that they search the city for the cab driver? No. You're going to shrug. You're a billionaire. You lost $10. So what? You're too rich to be concerned about that kind of loss. This week, someone criticized you. Something you bought or invested in turned out to be less valuable than you thought. Something that you wanted to happen didn't go the way you wanted it to. These are real losses. But what are you going to do if you're a Christian? Will this setback disrupt your contentment in life? Will you shake your fist at God? Will you toss and turn each night? If so, I would offer to you it's only because you don't know how truly rich you are. If you're that upset about your status with other people, if you're constantly lashing out at people for hurting your feelings, you might call it a lack of self-control or a lack of self-esteem, and it is. But more fundamentally, you have totally lost touch with your identity. As a Christian, you're a spiritual billionaire, and you're wringing your hands over $10. There are slights that come to us. There are injuries, real wrongs that happen to us. But we have experienced the grace and forgiveness and love of God, the generosity of a God that has given us so much. We can respond in kind. We can be generous too. We can forgive. We can give. Even in the face of people who disagree, the face of people who insult, or the face of people who do wrong to us. Why? Because we serve a generous God. There's a chart on the Daily Infographic website that offers the following list called the world's most expensive meals. At the Via Makihiko restaurant in Tokyo. Okay, that was my payback for what I put you through in church for years. You can get a bowl of ramen for $110. The Capitol Dog in Sacramento, California serves up the Ultra Dog, the world's most expensive hot dog, at $145.99. In Scotland, you can order a bottle of End of History beer, Belgian ale packaged inside taxidermied squirrel carcasses, for $800 to $1,110 per bottle. The Westin Hotel in New York City offers a white truffle bagel that sells for about $1,000. For $1,000, New York City also boasts the Golden Opulent Sundae, which includes rare cocoa beans harvested off the coast of Venezuela. And for you pie lovers, think about this for the pie. At $2,000 a slice, or $16,000 per pie, you can enjoy Britain's Wagyu meat pie and its savory combination of 6 pounds of Kobe beef and matsutake mushrooms, which sell for $910 per pound. And in Italy, Chef Viola's Louis VIII pizza, loaded with lobster, caviar, 8 different types of cheese, and seasoned with hand-picked pink Australian river salt, sells for $12,000. Think about that. Make you hungry? As costly as all of those meals, none of them are as extravagant, as generous, or as costly as the meal that we are to partake in today. Jesus, out of the abundance of his grace and love, generously gives to you and I the opportunity to encounter him in communion. It is without cost for us. It came at the cost of all for him. And so when you think of generosity and what true generosity is, think of Jesus. Think of all that he was willing to give so that you could know his love, his grace, his favor. Shouldn't we also give to others so they too can know forgiveness and love and grace and peace? There is no scale in this universe that can weigh the magnitude of God's generosity. His is the true generosity to us. And we have simply to receive what he has given.